Hey, you're about to watch an interview that I did with George Solis, the king of short term rentals. He's absolutely crushing it, going from $0 in revenue during the pandemic to now like well over six figures. And stay tuned towards the end because he actually goes through a few case studies where he shows you the actual gross profit, net profit that he's making on some of these properties. And I think you're going to be blown away with what some of these properties are generating. So, hope you enjoy the interview. Hey everyone, I'm here with my buddy and absolute all-star. He's like a rock star anywhere you see him on Facebook today, killing it in short-term rentals. George Solis, real estate investor, short-term rental specialist, who throughout the pandemic went from zero to like six figures gross in income, just crushing it monthly. How you doing, George?
Chris, thanks for having me, brother. I am doing wonderful, man. Just making it, building it, and very blessed, man. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. It's been really fun watching your story transpire, and when we got to know each other just a little bit, probably a little bit before the pandemic, and then I've been watching you get in the short term rental game, which we were kind of dabbling into, and I've just seen you absolutely explode that business to the point where now you're sharing that with other folks because it's definitely a very hot topic, a very growing industry right now. And I want to unpack that because I know there's a lot of folks that'll be able to get a lot of value if whether they're actively running short-term rentals now or if they're looking to get into the market. And ready to do
Let's
this?
go. Let's do it, man.
All right, cool. To give a baseline for what like anyone that if you're in the Houston, Texas area and you're in real estate investing, you know the name George Solis. Outside of that, people may not know who you are. What does your business look like today? Who are you? What are you doing in real estate?
Altogether, we've got four lines of business right now, right? We are essentially in starting from the marketing end for the front end, how we're acquiring our clients, either for partnering for properties, and just for all together, just in our full range of businesses, right? Is by marketing ourselves as the guys to go for the short-term rental space here in Houston and all across the nation, right? And that looks like we've got an event company, right? That's who acquires our clients, and we get a lot of properties from there. We get consulting clients, and we get partners, right? We purchase real estate. We essentially also rent real estate, rent properties from other landlords. So we're working with various landlords, property management companies, wholesalers. We've got bird dogs, and then now we are launching our acquisitions line, right? We're relaunching that because we had that back in the day, right? Before I even got into short-term rentals, I was wholesaling and flipping in the whole nine yards, right? But yeah, that's how we all get started, right? Wholesaling. So, and essentially, we do it all so that we can grow our, passive income through short-term rentals. And not saying that short-term rentals are passive. I'm saying they're passive for me because we built a business that allows me to be passive, right? And yeah, that's pretty much it. So events, coaching and consulting, acquisitions, and property management.
Yeah, so you've got a full suite of systems, I guess, in your conglomerate of ventures there. But the events, it's educational. So you're educating both the end consumer. These are folks that you may end up working with, whether you're doing an arbitrage or buying their house, or other investors who want to get into the game, but maybe they find a deal that they don't want and that you do want. So you put it into the portfolio. I'd imagine maybe there's some private lenders who like what you're doing and they'd be happy to fund your projects. And then there are folks that they want that more hands-on, understanding to work with someone who's been there, done that. So they're willing to get coached or go through any training that you have. Does that kind of sum it up?
Yeah, I mean, essentially, we work with a variety of real estate investors. That's who our client is, the real estate investors. And I like working with investors. I'm an investor myself, right? And when you work with investors, they have the mindset to be able to take things to the next level. If we need them to step up and go out there and negotiate, they're going to go and negotiate, right? So yeah, I mean, we work very hard to build our portfolio and to manage our properties and to teach people how to do the same, right? So we're very successful at building other people to do the same, right? And you guys do short-term rentals too. So you've kind of asked me a couple of times, and we've had a conversation. But yeah, we love the market. We love just the impact that we're making in this world.
Awesome, awesome. All right. So, how did you get started in real estate? You hinted on the wholesaling, flipping. I know that game very well. How'd you end up getting started prior to the short term rental game?
Absolutely, brother. So I'll make this like a 2-3 minute, build up of my story. Where like essentially, I'm from Peru, right? And then when I was in Peru, my parents got a divorce, and I went to live in this little town. So I grew up by in an Adobe house melted, and I grew up playing soccer in the streets. And we moved to the U.S. in 2000, right? And I'm, I didn't know any English. So I moved here, I was like, oh my God, I always wanted to own my own business, right? So as I grew up, I was just trying to find myself, as we all do, right? We try to find in that search, and I essentially went into the industry of hospitality, right? So I was an event marketer. I was a waiter, bartender, so I managed restaurants and bars, and then I did the marketing for them, right? And I did this for 10 years. So I spent 10 years meeting people and, sort of building relationships and being, marketing venues, marketing events, marketing parties. So that led me to build a nightclub, right? So I opened my own bar, my own nightclub, but I partnered with another guy, and I really didn't know very much about real estate, about building, about really opening up an actual brick and mortar business, right? So when I jumped into it, I was more of like a second or third in command, where I was just doing the marketing, and I was letting somebody else run the entire thing, right? So because I didn't really worry about it and I trusted, I went for, I didn't have the precautions, right? I didn't set up myself for success. So I essentially watched it all fall apart, right? So I lost over $400,000 from this big joint venture investment that we did into a nightclub, and this is in 2016 when we opened it, and then ended up shut down in 2017. And then I'm sitting, in my apartment at the time. I have nothing, right? I am, I don't know what to do with myself, right? I'm crying and I can't breathe, and I don't know. I'm just laying on the floor there, lost, and I really didn't know what was next. So I got a phone call from a friend of mine. He's local here, and I'm sure I always give him the credit, because he really did take me there. I went to his house. His name is Brett Franklin, and I was just a younger version of this guy right now. Very naive on the sense of business and real estate, right? Sat there for about 3 hours. And when I walked out of there, Brent, this guy is a hammer, right? Boom, you got to do this, boom, 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 boom. So I walked out of there with a vision, and I knew that I could create the vision, right? So I went and started studying and learning real estate. He was flipping at the time, and I wanted to do fix and flips. So I went and learned everything about real estate. I went to all the seminars here in Houston. I went to all the networking events. That's where I met you, right? And I met everyone at the networking events. I built the relationships with all of my friends that, I can officially call friends now, right? So that's where it all started. But then I was like, okay, how am I going to do this with no money? I was still working at the club at the time, right? I was still working at one club that I had to go back and, sort of ask for a job again because I had lost my nightclub. So I went from business owner back to employee, right? So I stepped it down. So it took me about 3 months to get my first real estate deal, but I got my first flip in February of 2018. And we closed that out. We sold it in, towards the summer, made $46,000 on my first deal. I was really happy. But then I had more deals that I was putting together with private lenders, with different partners, and those were different flips, right? And then I figured out what wholesaling was. And I was like, oh my God, you can wholesale a property and make $15,000, $20,000 or $10,000 and not have to buy it, not have to put up a bunch of cash. I was putting up, $500 for earnest money here, $100 there. You know how that game goes, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, and then I made $98,000 in a period of 6 months doing wholesaling. So I was like, oh, this is really good. What am I going to do with it, right? And I discovered what short-term rental was maybe a couple months into wholesaling, and my goal was to really create big cash chunks and invest in my short-term rental business. I did that, as I was getting started in real estate, and in a period of 6 to 7 months, right? So I launched right after that in 2018. I launched my first 10 Airbnbs, and there were 10 apartments.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And in these apartments were doing good at the time, right? They were doing fine because I was managing everything myself. They're making, anywhere between 500 and 1,300 bucks. And when you are working in your business, your vision is narrow, but you're still making money, right? And essentially, I was cured from one thing, right? The one thing was that I needed cash flow, right? And I was hurting because I was waiting 2, 3 months for these deals. And then all of a sudden I had this really good month in the middle of the summer of 2018, and I made $62,000 from wholesaling. And that's when I took, part of that money and invested it into, $5,000 per apartment, right? I would rent the apartment for $1,000, and I would put in a deposit for 1,000, and I would furnish it for 3,000. You imagine what kind of furniture is that, right? Like, it was just a little 600 square foot studio in downtown in Montrose, right? And then I realized that was the solution. That's what I needed to get on my feet and build something, because sometimes our problem is that we are narrow-minded. We're not really seeing what we need. So I figured out what I needed, which was cash flow, and short-term rentals and Airbnb cure that. Now I needed to figure out how to scale it and make more money. So started getting more apartments, right? By the end of 2019, I had 35 apartments and 5 houses. And you can imagine 35 leases in all apartments. COVID hits, and now all the apartments are empty.
Everything changed.
I don't know what to do with myself again. I'm like, oh, wow. 18-hour days trying to figure out how to get these places booked, and Airbnb is restricting people from, booking these apartments, right? And then my houses were just actually doing completely fine. I realized that my apartments were empty and they were making almost non-existent money, right? In that month of April, when COVID really spiked up, was terrible, right? And it was a loss for me. But then I realized that the houses was the way to go, right? They were the way to go, because my houses, even during COVID, they were making money, right? And so I started transitioning to houses. That's when I also got this spark, right? I was trying to figure out what I needed to do to fix the business at the time, because you always, as an entrepreneur, you go up and down, right? And
Yep.
don't get me wrong, being successful in Airbnb, and all of a sudden you get shut down again by the pandemic, I had to figure it out, and I did, right? And I took my business from doing 50 or 60,000 a month with all these apartments, right, during the pandemic, which is barely breaking even, to 150 plus per month, right? And this is with the houses. So what we've done is we've transitioned, got rid of all these apartments and transitioned to houses. Now these houses, they're bigger square footage, they're single family residential. And our model is turning these regular mid houses into beautiful, beautiful properties that people are going to pay top dollar and premium for. And that's how I got started, and I came up to today. So today, I am just honored to have awesome friends like yourself. I surround myself around super high achievers, and then that's what you've got to do, right? You got to elevate yourself. And now, I'm happy and honored to say that I love elevating others, just like I elevated myself.
Yeah, you can tell you're excited about it. It just kind of pours out. So that's good. Well, one side question that I had that kind of popped up in my head, because you had so much experience in the hospitality service fields prior to your real estate ventures, how much do you think that played into being able to solve some of these unique problems, to be able to get a product online that's going to serve the end customer and they'll pay you top dollar for?
Well, at the beginning, that experience was good, but my product was not the right product, right? It was a good starting point, and everybody needs a starting point. You just need to start, right? So just because I launched, with apartments, it did, my experience helped me a ton, being able to deal with these guests and solve these complex problems, right? Which is part of the hospitality. But then my starting point was not my ending point. It was not my midpoint, right? We
You were
just
learning along the way. So
right.
it sounds like it helped you tremendously. You knew what to do. And then once you got there, you realize, hey, wait, there's actually a better thing that we can solve for them, pandemic forced or not. End up going to more focus on houses. That really clicks all in now.
Yeah, absolutely. It clicks
So,
much better than it.
what, so you're targeting houses, so apartments pretty much out of that for now. One common question, so for those looking for cash flow, and you mentioned that Airbnb is not necessarily passive. I mean, it can be if you got the right systems and team in place. But for landlords out there that are focused, and this is mainly me, long-term investors, long-term rentals, what do you look for that you know that, hey, this property would make a really good short-term rental as opposed to a long-term rental? Or how did the two compare, long-term rentals versus short-term rentals?
So if you've got a long-term rental, I mean, obviously you're going to look for, something that's going to be long-term that has, you're going to buy in low and obviously get as much rent as you can. And then that's typically going to be the smaller properties with smaller neighborhoods, right? So I wouldn't say as much of a high-end neighborhood. Now in the short-term rental space, to be really profitable, you can't take that model, but step it up just a small notch to median houses, right? So instead of 150,000, 180,000, you could take these 250,000 to $300,000 houses and really dial in with the cash. Now, I'm not saying that those properties that are good long-term rentals wouldn't make good short-term rentals. I'm just telling you that there's a sweet spot in there, and it's that area, right? But now there are also amenities in a long-term rental. You have to, you don't really worry about having a really beautiful backyard and a pool, right? A pool is more of a liability, right? In the short-term rental end, you want to have as many amenities as you can, have pools, hot tubs, and all of the above to make just a legitimate experience. So think of a short-term rental as a unique offer, right? So what you want to do when you're selling anything in life is create as much value as possible.
It's
right?
like a motel versus a Hilton. Like a motel, that's the place to crash, no amenities. You want to make a Hilton experience in a single family house. Now I say that maybe you get a better way of defining that, but it's that full experience with amenities, with the actual furnishings and everything from the point they talk to you till the point they're checking out.
Yeah, I mean, you said it. There's no other better way to say it. We create Hilton experiences in just a regular house, right? So, yeah, I mean, that's it, Chris. There's no fluff about it, and you have to deliver value. And the way that, Airbnb, the OTAs, online travel agencies work, you've got to be up there. So you're creating an experience because you're offering a very cute property, right? And just because the amenities are there, you also need to know how to market them,
Yeah.
right? So the marketing part of it is one of the pillars that we teach and is very important, right?
Oh,
So
absolutely. Yeah. If no one can find you, you're not making any money, regardless of what kind of product you have.
exactly.
Now, Airbnb, VRBO, that those platforms make it easier now. But another thought that came to mind was when you were talking about how the difference in the quality of the property. Now, quality relative term, but even if you take a really nice long-term rental, by and large, and I'm sure we don't need to go on a big tangent here because I know I can, because I've been sued by a developer for having Airbnb. I think a lot of communities, developers, HOAs, they don't quite understand the Airbnb industry. And when I talk with other investors, I just tell them, like, look, they don't understand. If we can educate them, then a lot of these communities would probably be okay with it. Because at the end of the day, I own a lot of long-term rentals. At the end of the day, the moment that house is rented, I am done with maintenance. Outside of something crazy happens and they call me, like a tree fell on it or whatever, I'm done with it.
Mm.
They mow the lawn at their own expense and frequency. They take care of everything, and they need to be doing that, but it is their responsibility. We just know tenants, how they prioritize maintenance. Not very much, right?
Right.
So the best condition that property will ever be in is the day it's leased, all the way until the tenant moves out. We got to go back in and do another make ready. With an Airbnb or short-term rental, completely different. It
Yep.
must be constantly maintained at its highest potential, highest condition to attract the customer. Because the moment you slack on that, they're just going to go stay down the street at the next guy who's got something better. So I think if we can educate communities like that, showing like, hey, look, no, I'm actually helping the community by keeping this house in like tip top shape. Call me if you got issues, any guests, but I'm actually helping by keeping the property in such great shape.
Yeah, I love the way you look at it. Chris, you have to be able to, first of all, the house does have to stay in the greatest shape. So it is an asset for the neighbor, right? Now there are some instances where, maybe the tenants are going to leave things out on the street. So you do have some issues, but there are always ways to solve that, right? So it could be bad, it could be good for the neighborhoods, but every problem has a solution, right? And that's what we're here to do. We're here to solve problems, and big problems. Solving big problems creates, even a better thing for all of us, right? So, yeah, man.
So there's Airbnb, short-term rentals, hot topic. It's still it's still a very young industry. Ton of growth, a ton of change. Like we don't know what the industry will look like in 5 or 10 years from now, other than it's going to continue growing. For those who are looking to get into this, get their first short-term rental, and I'm sure I know you have a lot of people asking you this question. What's your advice?
So, what I would tell you, don't wait, right? And it's a great industry, but you've got to know your numbers. If you know your numbers, you're going to be successful. Now, if you're going in and just getting started, right? There are many, many mentors out there. I mean, you can come hang out with us at the boot camp, and learn from us 3 days live in person, or you can maybe jump on one of our webinars, one of our online trainings. Or it didn't have to be me. Go out there. And if you're thinking about it right now, don't think anymore. Stop being on the fence, jump over that fence and go get it, right? Imagine if all this one rental did bring you $2,000 a month, would that be worth it? Imagine if it made the change in your portfolio so that, maybe you could change your 5 long-term rentals into short-term rentals, and then you hire someone to sort of manage that, right? And at the end of the day, instead of making $400, now you have a portfolio that is netting you $8,000, right? Would that be worth it and change your life? That's what you got to ask yourself. So waiting, and having that one property or those 5 properties and not jumping into business, knowing what you're missing out on, is for me, is I would, not take that, that road, but most people do. They're like afraid, they're scared, right? So go get it out there, right? Don't have to be from us. It could be from anybody out there. A lot of people doing this business, right? But get started right now.
And there's a lot of risk management that you can put in place. So arbitrage or experience that, where you get like a master lease. So you don't actually have to buy the property. Now, that doesn't mean you don't have lease obligations, because you do. But it's not like you're having to go out and take a $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 loan. But I think one of the biggest things, the biggest opportunities that short-term rentals provide, and especially the platforms like Airbnb and VRBO, making it easier to do this, is it gives us all the ability to run a McDonald's business. And what I mean by that is, there's an old story. Ray Kroc was asked, like, hey, what business are you in? And he said, I'm in real estate. And they're like, what? Like, no, you're in the hamburger business. He goes, no, I'm in real estate. We now have a hamburger stand that pays for the best real estate all over the world. So the Airbnb, VRBO, short-term rentals allows that model. It allows regular folks like us, who don't have millions of dollars in our back pocket, to afford prime real estate and have someone else pay for it. Customers who are willing to go there. And now, if you want to do it as a business, there's margins and math to make sure that works. If you want to do it where you just want a guest house somewhere that you can go frequent a couple times a year and then have someone else at least just break even on it, that's another way you can look at it. But ultimately that model allows us to run a McDonald's, basically a real estate type McDonald's business, anywhere we want. I think that's truly amazing. I don't know if you've ever thought about it that way.
Oh, absolutely. The goal, it's impossible to literally just blow up and build 1,000 properties, but it's not impossible because of operations, right? It's impossible if I want to do 1,000 properties in the next 3 years, right? But what is not impossible is creating a hybrid model, and that's how you get to the most properties, right? This is exactly what we're doing, right? We are working with people and we are finding them properties, like our teams are, right? We're working with people and we're partnering with them. So we're creating the real estate, the McDonald's model, but doing it through several avenues. We're doing our own, we're partnering with people, right? And we're doing it for other people. So
it's arbitrage. Everything is arbitrage now. The internet has commoditized everything. Everything must be arbitrage. So it's like real estate leads for motivated sellers. Like that's arbitrage because you're going to run your own marketing campaigns. Yes. But you can also go into Zillow on the Make Me Move or get internet leads from other people. Realtors are doing the same thing. They're buying leads from Redfin and Zillow, and they're doing their own marketing and building community, something that you're doing, that I'm doing, real estate agents do. Gary Vee talks a lot about that. And so, it's arbitrage at scale because you just can't be everywhere at once, but you can create community where you become like the center of gravity in your little unique niche with a few different marketing channels on top of community. That's how you get consistency. And then there's residual effects if you want to explore those, which you're doing that through events and education and stuff like that. But it also creates more stability, right? Multiple streams of income.
Love it. Yep. So,
all right. What does your business look like 5 years from now?
5 years from today, our portfolio is going to look above 100 owned properties. Right now, we're going to be $10 million in revenue.
Will you be international? Can I go to Venice? Will I be able to stay in a Solace villa over there?
Right now, I don't have that as a goal, but you never know. You never know. Yeah, internet. I mean, that would be great. No, I essentially, my model is coming in from the front, right? We provide these services, and we're doing business with our own students. They are coming to us, and they're like, "Yeah, I want you to help me do this. I want you." So our consulting is creating our entire business model. So we only have to market one time. Right? We market one time, we get a client, and now we have 3 different streams of income, right? So as I build this, it's changing every day, every month, right? The vision always changes. The end result's the same, but the roadmap is changing, right? So right now, my sweet spot at 5 years is 100 properties, $10 million in revenue a year, which is crazy, but I love it. I am crazy, right? And this is from all of our companies. And then all of it through short-term rentals, all of it through, all the different avenues that we're creating to short-term rentals, right?
Do you ever sit back and just be like have like this 15 seconds where you're like, what the hell is going on? Like in full goosebump humility, knowing that for you, crying on your floor after a bad deal with the bar, to thinking, and not just thinking, seeing a pathway forward to a 10 million in revenue business in the next 5 or so years. Does that ever just kind of give you the chills, that is the reality of the situation?
People, they actually think that they can do more in a year, but they don't really know what they're capable of doing in 3, right? So when I look back, I always do. And that brings you wisdom, right? Thinking about where you were a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and compare yourself to where you are now. And it's not the results, it's just seeing the gap, right? Most people, they don't understand they always focus on what they don't have and what they haven't achieved or where they're not, instead of seeing how far they've come in the last year, 2 years, and 3 years. So to answer your question is yes, I sit down and I see myself there, but then I also look back, I'm like, wow, 3.5 years ago, I was in the shoes that I just mentioned while, a couple of minutes ago, crying, not knowing what I was going to do with myself.
Which really, in the grand scheme of your life, that's 3 minutes ago. It was that quick, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it sounds like it was not that long ago, but when I look back and I see what we've done in 3.5 years, it's incredible. So I am appreciative. I am so grateful that that has happened to us. And now I'm just passing that great gratefulness, right? And that's why we're doing what we're doing. But yes, that's it.
You've got a best-selling book in you. That's for sure. Hopefully you're taking notes.
Coming.
All right. So you've got this big event coming up, 5 Houses to Freedom. I absolutely love that marketing campaign or that slogan or brand that you have. And so much so that when I saw you publish that, I told my wife, I'm like, dude, 5 Houses to Freedom. I'm like, why didn't I think of that? That's like so amazing. It's so good, like because of what we do and we teach. More on the long-term side, like I was like, man, I could have totally used a brand like that. So I love it. This event, people who are considering or who should consider going to this, and what can they expect? Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Absolutely, brother. If you're a landlord, burned out, and you're tired of making 200, 300, 400, or even $500, this is for you. If you're a fix and flipper and essentially you've got some cash in the bank and then you're tired of waiting for these big chunks of cash, this is for you because it brings stability. It brings consistency. That's what short-term rentals do, bring cash flow. If you're a wholesaler doing the same thing, this is for you. If you're a creative finance investor or even an Airbnb host who's done a deal, or even a realtor who does deals and wants to convert one of these houses into cash flowing STRs, and they're profitable cash flowings. I love to break the financial model, by the way, for you, in just the next couple of minutes. But bro, these short-term rentals are going to just knock out any long-term rentals out of the park any day, right? So realtors, wholesalers, fix and flippers, landlords, that's who we teach, right?
When is the event?
November 1st through the 4th. And then the 1st is actually going to be a reception where you get to network and hang out with all of us and everybody that's attending and decides to come. We're going to go over pillar 1, right? Pillar number 1 is essentially the market research, how to identify these most profitable areas and most profitable properties. That day we're going to cover pillar 2, which is the perfect properties. Right. Day 2, we're going to cover pillar 3, which is your staging and interior design, then marketing strategy, and then guest experience. And we've got, super special guests that are also going to be covering like super high-end marketing, right? My business partner, Jerry, is going to be covering all about how to market your short-term rental. My business partner, Robert, he's also going to be covering all about, the numbers, your P&Ls, and then how much cash flow you can really make, what are your expenses, right? So we're going to be going pretty deep, brother.
And so this is an in-person event. It's not virtual, correct?
It is in person, and it is not virtual. We do have a virtual coming next month, but this one is in Houston, November 1st to the 4th.
Okay. All right. And you mentioned case studies. Can you show us some real numbers?
Absolutely.
All right. Yeah. Just walk through 1 or 2 of these things and to give people an idea of what they can really expect.
Absolutely. So this is an arbitrage deal, right, in Cypress, Texas.
And real quick, what is arbitrage? Like, define that a little bit. We talked about it very briefly, but
right. So rental arbitrage is where we rent to rent, right? So we're going to rent these houses from landlords. We literally, these are probably from this house is particularly from investor friends of mine, right? So, but as a regular host or investor out there, if you want to do arbitrage, you just have to go, get with an investor, right? And then negotiate the deals to get them rented to yourself for market rent. And then you're going to put them on these short-term rental platforms and or add them on a direct booking platform, right? So, and these properties, cost anywhere between $10,000 to $1,000 at a medium of four bedrooms, right? For this one we just launched. The first month it did $9,800. Now, currently, as it is low season, it's doing about seven, right? 6 to 7,000. And if at 6 to 7, you're looking at a couple $1,000s profit, but at 9,000 in the high season, right, which is your summer, you're looking at $4,000 to $5,000 profit, right?
Man. So that 1250 or 12,500 startup cost, what does that entail?
That was startup cost for the furnishings, and that did not include first month, last month, right? So you put that plus 5,000. So I think that maybe we had extra furniture for this additional property, but a regular 4 bedroom like this one would cost you around 15K all in, right?
Okay.
So and yeah, I mean, this one brings in anywhere from, on the low end, 1,500, 2,000 net, and then on the high end, $4,000 to $5,000 a month, right? So now you average that over a period of 12 months, and this is what essentially we're going to cover, right? How do you really know if this house is going to make? So there's a process, and there's a way to find out based on market data, based on historical, current, and future data, right? And that's what we do. That's what we're going to teach, right? So this one makes pretty good money, and we can go over this is the first. We launched it here on the 27th, and it got a booking for 1,100, and then we got a pretty sweet booking for 8,700.
Nice.
Yeah. So, and then this happens all the time, but I would say maybe.
So who pays $8,700 for a house?
8,700 is just the payout.
Yeah. So who pays for that? Well, what type of client and customer is that?
Family. This is a family that came to stay for whatever reason, right? They're families. So
because I've had some, it's just kind of weird. I've got one on the lake in Lake Livingston, northeast of Houston, and we've had some transient workers. Some folks are coming in for training, and they need a place to stay for a couple weeks. And then you get holidays, but then you get like the sporting type events of like or on the lake we get fishing events, but there's a million different type of sports. I mean, it could be a badminton tournament. You just never know, like some special events, some conference that comes in,
right? So yeah, you have different avatars, different clienteles, and they'll just come in, right? You have people that are staying for relocation. There are a lot of relocation. We work with some relocation service companies, right? And we get our bookings through VRBO, Airbnb, and direct. Okay, so I'm sure you do too, right? What does your property do in the high season and low season? Your Lake Livingston one.
I don't run it, so that's a Jamie question. I found the deal. She runs 100% of all the management. I know we've done the math, because this is a 700 square foot property. If we rented it out, this is going by memory because she manages it all. If we rented it out 700 square feet on the lake, we'd probably get like $1,000 a month. We get about $3,000 a month. It was a little bit higher over the summer. I think if you averaged it out, it'd be about 2,700, 2,800. And that's considering that we actually haven't remodeled it. We bought it as is. It's still kind of dated. We put in some new flooring and we did put in a new dock, but I'm very happy with the ROI. I think we could probably make another 50% more if we did a remodel. Yeah.
And you guys need to attend, right? You should be, are you attending?
I'll be there.
All right. So so just going through this one, pretty good one. First 30 days.
That's my house.
That what it looked like, right?
No, similar layout, square footage.
And so like we equip our properties with like a super, really good coffee station, right? We put nice 2 types of coffee makers and, toasters and, electric knives and rice cookers and tons of plates and, the kitchen, our kitchens are fully loaded, where people can stay for a full month and have everything.
Yeah.
Right. So that's one of the ways that we create that irresistible offer for our client. We just provide everything they need and it's there. Right. And then we create the uniqueness, by going out there in the backyard or, something has to be, beautiful. Right.
Love it. Love it.
So this one is another rental arbitrage. Okay. And let me see if we have, okay. So this one, we spent about 26. We've already put another 7,000 down. We got cabanas, we got day beds, right? And I'll show you where. I don't think I have a backyard, but this was in Westbury, and this could happen anywhere in Houston. It's not
Is that the
just-
one y'all just posted?
No, this is the one we got in April, right?
Okay. Because you just posted one where you had the day beds in the back. I'm like,
Yeah, that's it.
I want to stay there.
That's it. That's it. So those day beds were not there. We built them all, right? And I had a carpenter go out there, and
Dude, they look sweet.
and that's it. It is about creating a USP, unique selling proposition. How do I attract the client that's going to pay me $1,000 a night, $800 a night?
Yeah.
What do I need to put in?
That alone makes a statement. I haven't seen the rest of the house, but that alone makes a statement.
Exactly. So like a house like this, I mean, if we build a day best, let me just say 33,000, right? We launch it the same month, makes 10,900. But if we go back, in July and June, it brought 16,000. So you think April was like, 10,900, and I think the next month was, 14,000. So it's averaged pretty good during the summer, right? And obviously, if you do 16 versus 10, the profit is completely different, right? And then also there's management, right? We have our own management company, so we're paying ourselves a management fee because I've got to have people run it. That's how it makes it passive for me, right? But at this number, this property made 50% profit margins, and I'm a big adamant about hitting that 50% mark. So and it's tough with the little apartments, right? It's tough with apartments. I never did. And it's even if you do 50% profits. If 50% of 1,800 is 900,
it's not worth it,
right? Or 2,000. So, and that's why I love the house model, right? And as we evolve it, we just first hit our first $20,000 a month this past summer, and a year and a half ago, I was wishing I had a house that hit 10,000. So it's not immediate that you can. That I created personally a house that brings in $20,000 or $10,000. It takes a little bit of time, but you can have a shortcut to getting there, right? And then the shortcut lands on get with somebody that knows and has done it. That's the shortcut, right? So let's keep checking it out. So in June, it brought in 16 and made that. And here are some of the reservations. Okay, so 3,400, 2,000 during the week, 37, 34. Then there's one for 45. There's one for 58, right? And then in July, it brought 26, which is incredible. This is when we broke our first, $20,000 a month. And then now the profit just doubled.
Yeah,
right?
My long-term rentals never do that.
Yeah, I mean, not every short-term rental does this, right? You saw like one bring $6,000, right? So that one, it's fairly just 400 square feet less, right? And it's probably, maybe $50,000 or $75,000 less as a purchase, right? So you just have to create, and we work on these. They don't just come in and bring in $26,000 immediately. We have to put a lot of work up front. Most of the work is up front. Right. And if you create a beautiful property and you put the work up front, then it's easier to maintain it. Right. So if you start bad, and then we've done it, when I launched my first houses, they were making $3,000 a house. Okay. And that was okay. I was happy with that because my apartments were only making 1,800. Right. So I was like, oh, well, shoot, my rent was 1,000 in the apartments and then my mortgage was 1,600. Right. I'm only spending a little bit more and I'm making my margins work bigger. Right. Yeah. I mean, I didn't really know that houses could really hit these numbers, but here they are, right? So here's a reservation for 37, 44, 14, 4,083, 1,500, 37, right? So, and then I could go all day and truly just show you. In August also hit, we had a really good number, a really good month here. And yeah, I mean, in 1 month, we made our money back, right? So
nice paydays.
Yep. So yeah, man, and I could go here all day, brother, but I know that we are cutting it short on time. I could essentially go through all these case studies, right? But if they want more, come see me at the boot camp, right?
Absolutely. And before I get into the final closing questions, the boot camp, where can people, actually, we'll put a link in the notes here on where people can, how people can get RSVP'd for that. So these last 4 questions, real quick, I ask every guest the same questions. First one, if you could give advice to your 20-year-old self, and you're not old, I know you're not old, so maybe you got to say your 15-year-old self. But if you can get advice to your younger self, what would it be?
Number one, don't put all your eggs in one basket, which I do now by creating different streams of income, right? I invested 400K into one project. Now I'm investing 50, 80, 20, 30, right? Multiple streams of income. That's my second. Don't put your eggs in one basket, create multiple streams of income. That's my advice. And now I'm following my own advice, but after a major loss. But the loss brought this opportunity, right?
Yeah, well,
it would never happen. I would have never met you, bro.
Well, there's always growth through pain and distress. So pressure creates growth. We've lived that with flipping. So we realized, hey, all of our income was from flipping, and whenever margin started to shrink, that's when we moved into Airbnb and buying more rentals, and we joined EXP, and we did some other things. So what book or books have greatly influenced your life?
Oh my goodness. The Millionaire Real Estate Investor is one of the first books I ever read. That changed my mind when it came to thinking about investing.
Yeah, very good one.
So Gary Keller is the bomb. The other book that has really impacted me is Traction and Rocket Fuel. Mm-hmm. Right? It's given me the vision of how to really create the company by having an operating system. Right? And then when it comes to maybe entrepreneurship and really drive, the book Relentless and Winning by Tim S. Grover, it always makes me just on fire, bro. And then one of my mentors, my top mentors is Darren Hardy. So all his books, read them all, because it's literally going to open up your brain, your minds, your eyes. So that was 4 books.
No, I've read a few of those. So in the last 5 years, what new belief, behavior, or habit has most influenced or improved your life?
Laser focus along with productivity, right? And then my productivity comes on managing my time, right? When I did that, my life changed, because I was able to get things done. I was able to execute. I was able to grow, and I was able to grow on the things that matter.
Yes.
Being inside in the trenches, I was able to take myself out and grow my business.
I imagine Traction and Rocket Fuel had a little bit to do with that.
A lot. The biggest influence when it came to this course by Darren Hardy called Insane Productivity, that sparked how I actually live every day. It changed entirely how I spend every minute of my day during the week, of course, except when I take off, right? When I'm off, right? But that would be that one little spark that gave me the entire transition a couple years ago.
Blast. How can people reach out to you?
Well, 2 ways. George Salas 360, GeorgeSalas 360. And you guys can book a call with me and my team, and we can hop on and chat about STR. And the other way is visiting our 5H2F. That's it. 4 letters, right? 5H2F.com. And then that will talk about the boot camp. And then you guys can come see me, and we can hang out for 3 days. Woo.
Absolutely. So I'll definitely put those in the notes. Check them out. George, it's been a true pleasure. I've always enjoyed connecting with you, and we'll get connected here again in a few weeks. And yeah, man, I'm looking forward to it.
Absolutely, brother. I really appreciate the help you've been providing. to Mona, because after she got her license, I've seen you guys, you really be up there for, for your agents. Like, you are a trooper, right? You're a true mentor, and you're giving her support. So I'm definitely looking forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks, brother. And I appreciate your help. And it's an honor being here with you.
Absolutely. And to give her credit too, like there's not a lot of new agents that come on board and run fast. And so someone who's already cloned herself and has already got a few $1 million in the pipeline of transactions. And then on top of working with another agent's got a few $1 million, it's amazing. So I love working with winners, and that's why I like working with you and Mona. And yeah.
I love it, man. Well, thank you for the support, brother. And I hope to see you soon. Okay.
Absolutely. Take care, man.
You too. Bye.